Chapter 3. Uninvited Guests. Alexander began speaking quietly, the way Siberian people do, and yet at the same time there was no mistaking the feeling of inner tension in the heart of this young Siberian fellow already showing streaks of gray in his hair. When I read your book, Anastasia, I was a postgraduate student at Moscow University. I was interested in philosophy and psychology. I studied Oriental religions and was really immersed in my studies. And then along came Anastasia. Not in some faraway land, but right in my own neighborhood, Siberia, where I was born. And I could feel the tremendous power, logic, and significance in her words. I could feel a kindred spirit, something that really spoke to me. The foreign theories I had been studying paled in comparison to the extraordinary feelings that now welled up in me. I dropped my studies and rushed home, as though from darkness to light. I really wanted to see Anastasia and talk with her. I came home and began making trips with Yegorich in the boat to the place you described in your book. Yegorich and I figured out just where it was. From time to time other people would come and want to meet with Anastasia and ask about this spot. But we never took them there. The local residents had sense enough to realize what was happening and not give encouragement to the pilgrims. But one time we, or rather I alone without Yegorich, took a whole group of people to this place. Why did you do that? At the time it seemed like I was doing the right thing, something good. It was a party of 6. 2 of them were prominent scholars, and from what I could tell they had considerable resources at their disposal. Or those backing them, the ones who sent them, had considerable resources. The other 4 in the party were their security guards, armed with pistols and something else besides. They had 2-way radios. I was invited to accompany them as their guide. I agreed, but not because of the money. I had a long talk with them first. They didn't conceal their goal of their expedition, a meeting with Anastasia. Their leader was a gray-haired, pleasant-looking chap named Boris Moisevich. He realized that Anastasia all by herself could do more for science than many research institutes. They planned to take her out of the taiga and set her up in a nature preserve where she could live under conditions she was accustomed to, and they would guarantee her protection. Boris Moisevich told me that if they didn't do this, someone else would, and anything might happen. Anastasia was an extraordinary phenomenon, and they felt obliged to protect her and study her. Boris Moisevich had an assistant named Stanislav, a bright young man who claimed to be in love with Anastasia, even though he had never met her in person. I agreed with their arguments. They hired a small ship from a cooperative. They had a truck deliver barrels of aviation fuel to the ship. When we arrived at the spot, they set up tents on a promontory and summoned a helicopter on their 2-way radio. The copter was outfitted for aerial photography. It also had a video camera and some other unusual equipment. Every day, the helicopter would fly low over the taiga and take pictures, one quadrant after another. The 2 scientists made a daily examination of the pictures taken from the air. Occasionally, they would travel on the helicopter themselves to a spot that interested them. They were looking for Anastasia's glade, where they planned to land the copter. I could only imagine the noise the copter would make landing in Anastasia's glade, scaring all the living creatures around. I remembered Anastasia had a baby, and thought the roar from the copter might frighten him too. I tried to persuade the scientists that after determining the location of the glade, they shouldn't set the copter down there. I proposed that once they determined the location, they should draw up a map and go to the glade on foot. But Stanislav explained that Boris Moisevich would find it difficult making the long trek through the taiga. Stanislav shared my concerns about disturbing the peace of the taiga residents, but assured me that Boris Moisevich would be able to calm down both Anastasia and her baby. It all came to head on the 4th day. What came to a head? It happened when the copter flew off on a routine filming and photography trip, and we were busy back at our base. One of the guards noticed a lone female figure approaching our camp from the direction of the taiga. He reported this to Boris Moisevich. Soon the whole camp was watching the woman approach. She was wearing a light cardigan and a long skirt, and the kerchief on her head was tied in such a way so that it covered her forehead and neck. We were standing together in a group, with Boris Moisevich and Stanislav out in front. The woman came up to us, There was no fear or embarrassment showing in her face. And her eyes. She had the most extraordinary eyes. They looked at us tenderly with kindness, and we could feel a warmth from her gaze. It seemed as though she was looking not at our group as a whole, but at each one of us individually. We were all overcome by a feeling of excitement we couldn't explain. It was as though we had forgotten about everything else, and we were simply drinking in this warmth, basking in it, the warmth radiating from those extraordinary eyes of hers. And nobody even invited her to sit down and rest from her journey. She was the first to speak, and with a calm and unusually tender voice she said, "Good afternoon, people." And we stood there without uttering a word. Boris Moisevich was the first to respond. "Hello," he replied, for all of us. "Please tell us who you are." "My name is Anastasia. I have come to you with a request. Please call off your helicopter. It is very harmful for these parts. You are looking for me. Here I am. I shall answer any of your questions I am able to." "Yes, of course we've been looking for you. Thank you for coming on your own. That takes care of so many problems," Boris Moisevich began. But he still didn't ask her to sit down, even though there was a table and folding chairs by the tent. Nor did he take Anastasia's side to talk with her privately. He, too, was most likely distracted by her unexpected appearance. He started in right away, telling her about why we had come. "Yes, that's very good. You came to us on your own. It was you, in fact, we had come for. Don't worry, we'll call off the helicopters right away." Boris Moisevich at once ordered the senior guard to radio the copter pilot to return to base. The order was carried out immediately. Then he turned to Anastasia and began talking with her in a calmer and more even tone. "Anastasia, the helicopter's coming now. You will climb aboard along with our colleagues. You will show our colleagues the glade where you live with your son. The copter will sit down wherever you indicate, and you can fetch your boy. We'll take the two of you to a nature preserve near Moscow. Everything there will be arranged just as you say. That's only right. Nobody will disturb you there. The preserve is under 24-hour guard, which will be reinforced once you settle in there. Just occasionally, scientists will come and talk with you at a time convenient for you. These people will be thoroughly prepared. You will find them interesting to talk to, and they will be most interested in your views on certain natural and social phenomena, as well as in your philosophy. If you like, we'll provide you with a worthy assistant, someone who will be constantly at your side and can catch your inner meanings. In spite of his young years, he is already a prominent and talented scholar. Besides which, he has fallen in love with you even before meeting you. The two of you, I think, will be worthy mates. You have the potential to become a fine, happy couple. He is worthy of you not only because of his scholarship, but in his lifestyle too. Here he is." And at this, Boris Moisevich turned to Stanislav's direction and beckoned him over. "Come along, Stanislav, don't dawdle. Introduce yourself." Stanislav came over and stood facing Anastasia. He looked a little embarrassed as he started speaking. "Well, it looks as though Boris Moisevich has already proposed for me. I know this may seem a trifle unexpected for you, Anastasia, but I really am ready to ask for your hand. I am prepared to adopt your son and treat him as my own child. I am ready to help you in working out a host of problems, and I ask you to consider me a friend." Stanislav made an elegant bow before Anastasia, then took her hand and kissed it. He presented a most handsome and elegant appearance, and if only Anastasia had changed her clothes, they really would have looked like a most worthy and attractive couple. Anastasia replied to Stanislav in a tender, serious tone. "Thank you for your kind attentions to me. Thank you for caring about me." And then she added, "If you really feel you are strong enough to share your love and make another person's life happier and more fulfilled, then remember, there may already be in your circle of women friends someone who is dissatisfied with her life, unhappy about something. Pay attention to her, love her, make her happy." "But I want to love you, Anastasia." "I am already happy with another. Do not waste your energies on me. There are women out there who need you more than I do." Boris Moisevich decided to come to Stanislav's aid. "That other, is he the one whom you met with, Anastasia? No doubt you mean Vladimir. He's a long way from being the best example of our society. Whatever you say about him, it will not change my feelings. I cannot control my feelings. But why did you choose Vladimir to meet with in the first place? He's hardly what you would call either religious or scholarly, even someone who leads a normal lifestyle. He's just an ordinary businessman. How did you happen to fall in love with him in particular? At some point, I began to realize, Alexander went on, that Boris Moisevich, Stanislav, and the rest of the group had one clearly defined goal: to seize Anastasia, to take her by any means possible, and to use her only in their own interests, against her will. And it didn't matter whose idea it was, their own or on orders from somebody higher up. They would try their hardest to carry out their plan. And nothing, not even the most persuasive arguments, would stop them. Perhaps Anastasia understood this too. She could hardly be ignorant or unaware of their intentions, and still she continued treating the men standing before her as kind and decent people, even as friends. She spoke sincerely and forthrightly on the most sacred of topics, and it was her attitude and sincerity which restrained, or rather forestalled, violence. She was so ingenious at countering Boris Moisevich's and Stanislav's attempts to cool her feelings toward you that she showed all their arguments against you to be patently absurd. People say a woman in love sees only the good in the one she loves, no matter what he does or who he may really be. But her arguments were of quite a different sort. After the first flurry of excitement over Anastasia's appearance had passed, I was able to quietly switch on my tape recorder. Later, I would often listen and analyze what Anastasia said. I remember it all, and that all was enough to turn my whole consciousness upside down. "What turned your consciousness upside down?" I queried, wondering what Anastasia had said about me. And Alexander went on. When Boris Moisevich asked, "How did you happen to fall in love with him in particular?" Anastasia countered with a simple, direct reply. "There is no point in asking me a question like that. Nobody who is in love can explain why they love the person they do. For every woman in love there will be only one man who is the best and most significant person in the world, and that is the one she has chosen, and my beloved is the very best one for me." "But still, Anastasia, you cannot fail to grasp the absurdity of your choice. Even if it happens spontaneously, it's still absurd. That first breath of passion should have been chilled by your will, your abilities, the logic of your mind. They should have shown you how unworthy this man was compared to others. Think about it carefully." When I think about it carefully, I come to exactly the opposite conclusion. In this case, any further reflection is a waste of time. It only adds to the mysterious inevitability of what took place. Better just accept everything as it is. What? Accept an absurdity? A paradox? It only seems to be that way at first glance. You have made a long trip here from Moscow. You had quite a challenge getting to the spot on the riverbank. You asked questions about my love, but you do not seem to have grasped hold of another paradox, namely that this love can be better and more clearly explained by events that happened in Moscow, and it would have been better for you to reflect on them right there. It would have saved you coming all this way. What kind of events happened in Moscow? On the surface, they are very simple, but only on the surface. Right after meeting with me, Vladimir, whom you call a simpleton, an unremarkable and even malicious person, abandoned everything and left Siberia to go to Moscow. He went there to keep his word to me, to organize a fellowship of pure-minded entrepreneurs. Even though he had no money left, he still acted. In Moscow, there was a 2-story building at 14 Tokmakov Lane. That is where the people used to work who were in charge of the first association of entrepreneurs. When the people in charge left and the association started to fall apart, Vladimir went in there and things started to pick up again. In its empty offices, both the large and small ones, there he wrote various letters and addressed to entrepreneurs. He worked in his office from early morning until late at night, and even stayed there to sleep. People would come and see him, or just turn up and start helping him. They believed in him and what he was doing. I asked him to do this when he was with me in my glade here in the taiga. I told him how important it was. I worked out a plan of action and presented it to him. The goals were achievable, provided he carried out the plan in the order that had come to me in my dream. He was supposed to write the book first, and then use the book to explain a lot of things and spread information. It was the book that was to have found and brought together pure-minded entrepreneurs and provide him with the funds for carrying out this plan. But Vladimir did everything the right way as he saw it. He hardly thought of me at all. He realized the significance of the plan and put it into practice. Only he did it his way and changed the sequence. That way the goal was unachievable. He did not know this, and he acted with incredible persistence and resourcefulness. Other people who believed in the idea started helping him. The New Entrepreneurs Association very slowly began to sprout and grow in size. It was incredible, but things started moving just a wee bit. They were getting together, and these were pure-minded entrepreneurs. There's a list of their names and addresses. You can go check yourselves. We looked at this list. It was published in the first edition of the book. But I'm sorry to have to disappoint you, Anastasia. It will be a disappointment. The list included such entrepreneurs as Cristal, a Moscow distillery. Its product is incompatible with any concept of the divine. Everything in the world is relative, and perhaps this Cristal is not so bad in comparison with some others. Besides, we are talking about thoughts pure enough to change everything. Today's reality is the result of yesterday's thinking. I can agree with what you are saying there. Still, your Vladimir failed to organize a fellowship of pure-minded entrepreneurs. I assure you, Anastasia, you've pinned your hopes on the wrong man. After changing the sequence of events, Vladimir was unable to reach his goal. He did not even have the slightest opportunity or any funds to circulate information beyond Moscow. He came up against adverse circumstances, and he lost the offices where he could have continued his work. He lost his means of communication as well as his sleeping quarters. He left the building in Tokmakov Lane, along with the little group of local people who were helping him. He could not afford to pay his assistants for their work. He left without a kopeck to his name. He had no place to live, and not even any winter clothing. He had forsaken his family and been forsaken by his family. And do you know what he talked about with his little group of helpers as he headed for the metro along the icy streets? He talked about starting everything again from scratch. Even under those conditions, he was working out a plan, trying to get something going. After all, he is an entrepreneur. They, his helpers, followed him. They listened to him and believed him. They loved him. What for, if I may ask? You go ask them. These Moscow people, what for? Ask them what they found in him. Go to the building on Tokmakov Lane and ask the security guards there why each time they came on duty they would bring him some food in jars or wrapped in cloth to give him a decent supper. They tried to do it in such a way so as not to offend him with their charity. These burly security guards who did not have to answer to him, cooked borscht and other kinds of soup at home and brought it to him so he could have something of a homemade meal. They loved him. Why? When you visit that building, go have a talk with the pretty woman who used to work as a secretary there. She is a former actress. She played the lead as the kind alien girl in the film Through the Thorns to the Stars. She played her very well. It was a good film, calling upon people to care for and love the earth. Ask her why she, an employee of another firm in the same building, tried to help Vladimir inconspicuously. And she did help him. She was not his secretary, but she helped him. Why did she endeavor to bring my beloved coffee or tea for his lunch? She made it look as though it were her firm which was supplying her with the sugar, tea, and biscuits. In fact, she brought everything from her own home. She was not rich. She loved him. Why? At the same time he, Vladimir, was still losing his strength. He was dying. He was physically exhausted, but even on death's doorstep he still kept trying to reach his goal. He is an entrepreneur, after all, and his spirit is strong. Anastasia, you're talking in metaphors. What do you mean when you say he was dying? In an allegorical sense? In a literal sense. When he was in Moscow, his flesh was just about dead for several days in a row. People in such a condition usually lie motionless, but he was up and about. Possibly thanks to you, Anastasia? All during those 42 terrible hours I never ceased warming him with my ray, not even for a moment. But it was not enough. My ray could not retain the life in a body if the spirit were weakening. But Vladimir's spirit was fighting back. In its struggles, his spirit did not notice death approaching. It helped the ray. Then other little rays came to the aid of my ray. They were altogether weak and unconscious, but they were there. These were the rays of those around Vladimir in Moscow, people who loved him. His practically dead flesh began to be filled with life. When confronted by sincere love, if it is strong enough, death retreats. The immortality of man is in love, in his ability to ignite love within himself. I say, Anastasia, dead flesh can't walk about. You're still speaking in allegories, not scientifically. The criteria of human science are always temporary. There are truths that are valid beyond the present moment. But how, then, can modern scientists be convinced? We need results from objective measuring devices. Fine, go to the Kursk terminal. There's an automatic photo booth in one of the adjacent metro stations. During that bad period, Vladimir had his picture taken for an ID card, one of those small color prints. You may still be able to find it at the building at 42 Leninsky Prospect. Or Vladimir himself might have it. Take a careful look, and you will see all the outward signs of a dead body. The automatic camera captured even the death spots on his face. But you will also see life in his eyes, and a fighting spirit. And yet you were the only one who could rescue him, Anastasia. Tell me how it is you ended up spending so much of your energies on him. Why? I was not the only one who came to his rescue. Ask the 3 Moscow students why they rented an apartment for him at their own expense. When he finally realized the reason he was failing and set about writing the book, why did they, right in the middle of an exam period and trying to earn more money wherever they could, spend their evenings keyboarding Vladimir's text into their computers? Why? You can ask the same question of many Moscow residents who were at Vladimir's side in his times of need. The solutions to the mysteries lies in them, not in me. Why did Moscow and her people help him and take care of him? Why did they believe in him? The city of Moscow was also writing the book. I am thrilled with that city. I have fallen in love with it. No amount of roaring machines or senseless cataclysms devised by the technocratic world can nullify the embrace of kindness and love from the hearts of its people. Many, many residents of the city are reaching out for kindness and brightness, for love. Through all the bustle and clamor of roaring machinery, they feel its tremendous power and grace. But, Anastasia, what you say is really incredible and overwhelming. It couldn't happen all by itself. Once again, it shows the incredible scope of your abilities, the extraordinary possibilities that your ray possess. If you have evidently used it to enlighten the Moscow people who got in touch with Vladimir, you won't deny now that you did that, and that you were the one who made all these miracles happen. Love is what makes miracles happen. And I did use my ray to make careful contact with all those in communication with Vladimir. But all I did was give a bit of strengthening to the feelings of goodness, love, and bright aspirations that they already had. I only strengthened what was in them already. And the book was published by Moscow. The first print run was small, and it was a pretty slim volume. But people started buying it. It quickly sold out. Far from distorting the events he had witnessed in the taiga, it honestly described the feelings he had experienced. In the eyes of many readers, I came out looking clever and good, while Vladimir appeared stupid and none too bright. People in their homes reading the book did not take into account that Vladimir was with me one-on-one in the remote Siberian taiga. Everything back then was still extremely unfamiliar to him, and I do not know who else could go so far into the taiga with no gear at all, or how such a person would behave upon seeing what Vladimir saw. Vladimir was honest in the way he depicted everything, and yet for many people he began to look stupid. And here you are asking me, why did I choose him, and why do I love him so? In the process of writing the book, Vladimir was already turning his thinking around on many great things. He grasps everything very quickly. Anyone who has the opportunity of talking with him cannot fail to notice that. But he never tried to paint a rosy picture of his former self. Chapter 4. Chords of the Universe. Anastasia spoke warmly about you, Alexander continued. She knew all about people and events. She told them that the first book you wrote came out in Moscow in a small print run, and it was immediately led to enthusiastic reviews, poetry, paintings, and songs. She said that thanks to the sincerity of the writing, the book preserved the combinations and symbols she had sought out in the universe, and these were what aroused the extraordinary beneficial Panacean feelings in people. When Boris Moisevich heard that, he began fidgeting, and abruptly sat down at the table by the tent. I noticed he was surreptitiously trying to switch on a tape recorder. He was probably so caught up with the pursuit of important information that he completely forgot about everyone else around. He didn't even offer Anastasia a chair. He was so bent on extracting as much information from her as he could, and quickly. This old gray-haired fellow was excited and fired off more questions. Scientists in many countries of the world are trying to capture the extraordinary sounds of the universe with their costly specialized equipment. These sounds are out there. They are known to science. Maybe not all of them, just a few for the time being. Maybe just a billionth part of the whole. What devices do you use to capture them, Anastasia? What equipment will allow us to select the sound that can exert an effective influence on the human mind? The equipment one needs has existed for a long time already. It is called the human soul. The attitude and purity of the soul will accept or reject sounds from the universe. Okay, fine. Okay, let's assume you've managed to find and select from the billions of sounds the best that the universe has to offer, and then recombine them in the right way. But sound can only be reproduced with the help of a device or a particular musical instrument. What's the point of a book, then? After all, it can't make sounds. You are right, a book does not make sounds, but it can serve as a score, like a musical score. The reader will involuntarily utter within himself any sounds he reads. Thus, the hidden combinations in the text will resonate in the reader's soul in their pristine form with no distortion. They are bearers of truth and healing, and they will fill the soul with inspiration. No artificial instrument is capable of reproducing what resonates in the soul. How did Vladimir manage to preserve all your combinations if he himself knew nothing about them? I took note of Vladimir's speech patterns. Besides, I knew in advance that Vladimir would not distort the essence of the events or what he heard, that he would even present himself just the way he was. But he did not convey all the combinations of signs. He needed to carry on writing. After all, he set forth only a fraction of what he knew and was trying to make sense of when he started to write. He needed to continue with the writing. And he has already been touched by fame, an unprecedented fame at that. It would have taken only a little more effort to organize the Fellowship of Entrepreneurs, but then, all of a sudden, he took another step in my dream, did not anticipate. He left his Moscow apartment, on which the rent was already paid. To his Moscow entourage he left to them the privilege of receiving compliments from readers, while he himself boarded a train and headed out of town. Why did he do that? He had been wanting all along to seek out confirmation of some of the things I had said, scientific confirmation of the existence of various phenomena I had talked about, to investigate them. That is why he decided not to write any more for the time being, and so he went off to the Caucasus. He left Moscow to see the dolmens in the Caucasus with his own eyes, the ancient structures where living people went to die 10,000 years ago. I had told him about them. I also told him about the important functional significance these dolmens have for people living today. Vladimir came to the city known as Glensick. In the museum there, along with the museums in Krasnodar and Novorossiysk, he collected material on the dolmens. Then he met with various scientists, archaeologists, and local ethnographers who were studying the dolmens. He ended up with considerably more information on them than he was available in any one museum. Naturally, I tried to help him inconspicuously. I used the mouths of people who came to see Vladimir to inculcate a good deal of new information in him, so that he would have the opportunity to make his conclusions. But he also did his part by acting quickly and decisively. This was after he had compared all the information he had gathered with what I had told him. After the archaeologist had shown him the dolmen closest to the road, and he discovered that there were others, but that they had fallen into ruin for lack of proper attention from the local residents. The local people had never been much interested in them. Vladimir then did something that might seem incredible. In 3 months he managed to change the attitude of the local residents towards the dolmen. Then he began bringing flowers. The women ethnographers of the Galenzik Museum set up a public association, which they called Anastasia, in my honor. This association opened a school for tour guides in order to get the right message out to tourists about the dolmens, so they would preserve and take care of the dolmens instead of destroying them. In addition, they began organizing new tours, which they called excursions into reason. The tour guides at Galenzik began telling everyone about the significance of our pristine origins and about the works of the grand creator, about nature. Anastasia, do you think this was all because of him? Didn't you play a part here? If I could have done as much as this without him, I would have done it long ago. I very much wanted to. It is in one of the distant dolmens in these mountains that my foremothers' flesh approached its death. But how? How did one man, a nobody, manage to change people's attitudes in so short a time? And how could he have set up such an active association? You say that the local residents had access to scientific materials and all sorts of publications, since people knew about them at the museums. But they didn't pay attention. That is correct. They knew about them, but did not pay attention. But why did they then listen to him? How did he manage to pull it off? You can't change people's consciousness that quickly. But Vladimir did not know that. He did not know that consciousness cannot be changed quickly, and that is why he acted, and, in fact, changed it. Go visit that city. Ask the different people who joined the association. Find out how and why fortune smiled on Vladimir. I was thrilled by what was happening there. The Anastasia Association. He agreed to the name when they asked him about it. I thought he did it for me, that he was beginning to understand me and love me. And he really has managed to grasp a great deal, but he has not fallen in love with me. He has not done so because of my many mistakes and transgressions. I soon began to figure this out. I began to realize that my dream was actually coming true, and that people would indeed be transported across the dark forces window of time, and that people would be happy. What I dreamt about would come true, except that my love for him was not to be requited, and this was payment for the many mistakes I had made, my lack of perfection and my own insufficient purity of thought. What happened? What made you come to that conclusion? Boris Moisevich queried. In any case, everybody's known for a long time how coarse and uncivilized this fellow is. Believe me, Anastasia, as your senior, and as the father of a family, I can tell you that your parents would not have approved of such a union. I beg you, do not talk that way about one who is so dear to me. Regardless of how coarse Vladimir may appear to some people, I know differently. What else is there to know about him? Everybody knows what kind of people entrepreneurs are, and he is just a typical example of the species. That's clear to all. Anastasia, I must say you have a rather biased opinion of Vladimir. No matter, it is still my opinion. Besides, your assumptions regarding my parents' view is wrong.